In Revelation 7, John shares his vision of heaven with members from every tribe, tongue, people, and language standing in the throne room before the Lamb. Yet today, there are still over 7,000 unreached people groups around the world. For the last 6 years, my family and friends have been on a journey to find, vet, and fund the task remaining. Come journey with us to the ends of the earth as we share the supernatural stories of God at work through the men and women He has called to reach the unreached. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Unreached Podcast. Dustin Elliott here, your host. We are in the thick of Season 2 and have a really interesting guest today, a little bit of a pivot from our typical, out in the field, working among the unreached worker. This is someone who is curating and facilitating access to needs, whether that be professional, ministry-related, or a combination of the both, worldwide. And so I have Scott Eloquin today. He's with Switchboard, globalswitchboard.io, if you want to follow along on the website, if you're able right now. We are so excited to share this story. Switchboard gives people the ability to post what they're good at. What are your talents? What has God gifted you with online? And then ministries and organizations that have a need, whether that be building a website or social content management or accounting or grant writing or whatever the kind of place is that you are, gearing up for, you can go on Switchboard and maybe find someone that wants to volunteer some time or possibly look for a role with your organization. And so, Scott, thank you for being here. I can't wait to have this conversation. We know a lot of the same people, which we'll talk about today, but you and I are just really getting to know each other. So welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good meeting you guys. And Dustin and Clint, thank you guys so much for all you're doing to just take the message to the world. I think everyday believers have no idea. They think that missionaries are very mysterious beings that come by once a quarter. And to be able to make it personal and to make it real and to get them engaged is really what we're all about. So thank you guys so much for what you guys are doing.
Oh, well, we love it. In fact, the episode that's live most recently, they talk about that exactly. These missionary couple got to the field and then they met the missionaries that were there. And the biggest kind of realization they had was, these are just normal people, right? And one of my favorite quotes, God's not interested in your ability, just your availability, right? He can work. Can He work through you, right? It's about what He can pull off. So why don't you start out, give everybody kind of a little background on you, your family, how'd you get engaged with the Lord, and take us into the story of Switchboard.
Super. Thank you. So I'm probably like a lot of people that are in Austin. I grew up mostly in Austin and been around a long time. I was the guy that was raised in a Christian home, had a great environment, vacation Bible school. And as I got older, I taught mission friends and Awana and sang in the choir and all the things that people do. Professionally, I was a software guy. I was an Oracle guy, so we did big software implementations. Nice. We put in systems to run businesses. Along the way, we married my wife, Melanie, in 1989. When Melanie and I first got married, she had just come back from doing missions work in Mexico. That was a big part of her calling, and she was very involved in that. We had always really wanted to be much more involved in missions. And unfortunately, I picked a career that was not very good at that. It was go, go, go. I was working for Oracle, and then later I was running a business. And I ran it in such a way that it wasn't very easy to take time off and go do things. And, as much as you have, a lot of skills that you could help, first thing, most missionaries don't need software skills. And the second thing is it's hard to do it, in a 3-day weekend kind of a thing. So my wife did a lot of mission trips. My kids all did a lot of mission activities. We've supported missions our whole lives. But, I feel like a guy like me is kind of my future supply side customer. It's a guy who cares, who loves the Lord, who really wants to help, who maybe can do some helpful things, but just can't go. And so we motored along in our lives and, things were great. And then suddenly and unexpectedly and happily, we had a group come by and basically bought our company in 2019. So we exited. I was out that year. And then I was really looking for kind of the next lap. What's the thing that comes next for me, which was really to kind of prepare myself for the rest of my life. And so I went through Colson Fellows, which is a Christian worldview training that was awesome, 10 months, very rigorous, and started doing some contract work on the CRO side, so Chief Revenue Officer. So I was working with a friend of mine who has a software company. and then got involved with startups. So if I could insert a God story here, I was actually working with a startup team downtown that was it's a group that brings together ventures, venture capital, and startups to look at funding. And in that meeting, I had met a woman who was a believer, and we had this kind of sidebar conversation. And I started telling her about what we were doing with Switchboard. And it was a great conversation. Again, this is a very commercial crowd. Everybody's looking for the next unicorn. And I was downtown. I was walking back to my car, and it was really quiet. And I thought, wow, I have to quit my job, and I need to do this full time. Like, it wasn't exciting or it wasn't terrifying. It was very clear.
It was clear, yeah.
Very clear and unusual for me. And so I got back to the car, drove home. I talked to Melanie. She's like, okay, if that's what you need to do, let's do it. I mean, it was that. That was kind of the decision. Had a stand-up meeting with my boss the next morning. I'm like, so here's the deal. I have to quit. I have to do this thing. He is not a believer. Hopefully he'll be listening to this at some point. And he kind of got me to hang on for a few more weeks, but then I moved on to do this full time as a volunteer. But we really wanted to see whether or not what we're doing at Switchboard was feasible, whether it was even a possibility. And then the way to end that story is I had a lunch meeting with two of my board members, because we were already talking about this concept and had been for 6 months on Monday. So from Thursday to Monday. And these are two guys that actually go to this church. This is Nick Alter and Tim Allen. We sat down to lunch, and they're going to buy, and it's like all great. And they lean in, and they're like, so we've been talking. We think you should quit your job and do this full time.
That sounds exactly like Nick Alter, by the way, and Tim for that matter.
Yeah. So I was like, so I quit my job Thursday.
Which Nick did too, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I remember when he said he was leaving Alter Endeavors. I was like, wait, but it's Alter
named
Endeavors,
after you,
Nick.
right? Exactly.
He's like, yeah, I know, but I got to go do something else now.
But it was an amazing thing. It was a great validation, and for us, this was still around. It was a hypothesis. We have vast resources in the kingdom, and immense, profound scarcity in the field. It just seemed a little unbalanced, honestly. And you guys have talked about the 1%, going to the field and the Halloween costumes for your pets and things like that.
Now, you might have just named the episode, by the way. Vast resources in the kingdom and immense scarcity in the field, right? That's good.
Well, there you go. For me to take my skills and make them available is just, it's such an untapped resource. And what you realize is that mission organizations do all the things that traditional organizations do.
That businesses are doing.
Yeah,
right.
They just don't have the skills to do it. So back when we first were kind of spinning up, I was under the, I'm going to say, misconception that, well, virtual volunteering, that's going to be white collar on a computer. So accounting, websites is good, maybe education. And then you realize that, I met somebody at a class here at Austin Ridge, and he's a software sales guy. And I'm like, well, what could he do for the kingdom? And then I realized that my clients, my mission organizations that you guys know, they're implementing Workday and they're licensing Salesforce. Having right. a guy that knows how to Salesforce licenses on your negotiation team to make sure you're buying the right stuff is huge. I mean, literally 2-3 hours of time could make an enormous difference. So, back to the comment you made earlier about availability. It's not ability, it's availability. It's like, just make yourself available. And the stories we have of people that have said, I don't think I could serve, but hey, here's my name. If somebody needs help with this, let me know. It's like, I could go down the list.
Okay, let me summarize. Software guy, loved the Lord already, right? You'd grown up in the home, you had been giving, tithing throughout, and I think that there is a concept of, I do work and I cut a check, and the church, kind of the varsity Christians, go out and they take care of it. They do ministry and they do missions in some capacity. And man, we have been really trying to shift that focus to like, no, you're called by Christ to be a reflection of him day in, day out, 24/7, 365. You were doing that in some limited capacity as a software guy because of, limited availability on your time. Then the pivot to running a business, then an exit, kind of an unplanned exit. Mm-hmm. It sounds like somebody kind of unsolicited found you. And what a lot of guys do at that point is they end up at a incubator or a lab or in some capacity.
That's exactly what I did.
Right, where you're connecting new folks who are starting up with new ideas and other folks that have some money from maybe exiting ideas, and we've got some smart capital and you need some assistance, right? But you also took a 10-month deep dive course that I think probably really connected your heart to your purpose in your next season.
If you
right?
talked about really focusing your efforts, I think that's exactly right. And Colson goes through this intensive study, and then in month 7, you work on your 3-year personal ministry plan that says, okay, you know you can change the world. It's your responsibility to get involved. Tell us what you're going to do. And you write that up. And actually, this is what I wrote up for my personal ministry plan when I was commissioned from Colson Fellows.
I love that.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And so we wrote it up. We've got the commissioning. You have the revelation walking out that day because you had met another believer in a space of maybe not expecting to. And then confirmation comes, right, through meeting some other guys. So hypothesized, we've now kind of got an idea of what Switchboard is. Now, give us the meat. What is Switchboard right now? What are you actually doing?
So Switchboard is a platform that we say we connect everyday believers to Great Commission organizations and field workers that are doing the job in the field. So instead of outsourcing your faith, instead of it being more of a corporate thing, it is, if there's a need, we connect a need with an individual that can help you with that need. And the need could be a professional thing. I'm trying to file a form or do my taxes. It could be a personal thing. It could be, I don't know if I can retire, so can you help me put together a kind of a family personal financial plan? We had a woman that had who put in a request. They're actually in the Ukraine. It's a field worker in the Ukraine, and they had found out that their child had been diagnosed with autism, and can't get health care. Things are frenetic. They were very isolated, and so we actually put in a request through the system, and we found a family who actually had raised and is still raising an autistic child, and now they're meeting on a regular basis, which is just, my gifting for the Great Commission, my way that I can be involved in world missions is to have been blessed with a child that had a special needs that I've suffered with and struggled with and worked with for years. It's like, let's just cry about that. I'm like, wow, how incredible is that? It's not just accounting stuff.
Man, you can't quantify that either. You can't run a discounted cash flow analysis on that and put a value on it, right?
Exactly.
But like when you talk about storing up treasure in heaven with no rust and no moths and no decay, right? That pays massive dividends. That's a multiple right there.
It's really something. I was actually at a Christian incubator here in Austin a few weeks ago. Who are you? What do you do? I mentioned what I did, and there was a guy across the room that was staring me down. I'm like, he's thinking something. There was 20 people there. He comes over. He's like, that was my wife. That's us.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
It's like, you cannot believe what that has meant to her and to our family to be able to minister to this couple. So this is just me talking. My hypothesis 10 years from now is we're going to look back and clearly deploying resources for Great Commission activities for the kingdom is awesome. It's smart. It's a good supply chain move. It's got a high return on kingdom investment. But I think that the volunteers who get actively involved in their faith are going to be impacted more than the people that they're helping. It's a totally different thing. When you see there's a tsunami in the Philippines and you go, wait a minute, I got to see if my people are okay. Not, well, I guess I'll just pray for them. It's a real thing. It's a tangible, real thing.
I love that. And so for the listeners, and you know our connection with Austin Ridge, our local church, you know our connection with Bless, the Bless Foundation, bless.world. If you go to the website, globalswitchboard.io, and you look at some of their organizations, you're going to find a whole lot of our same connectivity, right?
Right.
You've got Christar on there. You've got Pioneers. You've got JVI, Justice Ventures International. These are all folks that we have partnered with through Bless and raised resources for and done some really incredible projects with. And so Steve Coffey and Chris Starr, man, I love Steve Coffey. I got to interview him before we started this podcast through Bless on a video when we did a project, I think our first one with them. And that project was so special. They had set up a center on a border between two kind of hostile nations, and there was a war, and the war was resulting in a ton of refugees leaving one country, fleeing into another, and typically these refugees were widows and orphans because the father had been commissioned and taken into the military to fight in the war and had most likely been killed or was just unheard of.
Gone.
And so they set the center up, and they were welcoming him, and they were giving him a warm bath and a shower and food and a bed. And then what can you do? And then that took the form of training, a job, a task, something they could actually earn some money and support their family with. And man, it just like that project just broke my heart when you think about the need, and then the kingdom coming together here in Texas, here in the United States, to fund it, to pray for it, and to build it, and to equip it. And that's a microcosm of an example of what you're doing now on a global scale. So if Chris Starr, Switchboard's around, that was probably 2019. Mm-hmm. If Switchboard's around then, and they need, a couple people to help set up X, Y, and Z for that project, they possibly could have gone to Switchboard and found those people.
Absolutely. So we're piloting a new product release in the next 4 weeks, and we've got 9 different volunteers that are engaged with Chris Starr right now. Actually, I'll give you an example. There's an amazing guy that has a peanut business. He's in Tennessee, but he's an e-commerce expert. He's really, really good. Chris Starr, their international group, basically has an incubator out of Malaga, Spain, where they bring in entrepreneurs to launch e-commerce business that they can take into country to source goods locally to be able to sell outside of the region.
Okay.
Creating jobs, creating a kind of a foothold in the country. And it's a very fast-paced e-commerce strategy where the fulfillment and all the technology is taken care of, but they model the business. And so this gentleman, Jay, actually is working directly with the guy that's running Chris Starr International to help them set up that incubator so they can launch those types of things.
Love it.
I mean, these are highly, highly skilled resources who are really good at a very specific thing, who can make guys in the field way, way, way smarter than what they are.
Another one that's on your list is Pioneers. Pioneers is our longest standing partner with Bless. How do you describe the impact this organization's had on the world? Steve and Arlene Richardson, love them dearly, and Nathan Burns on their team. And we've done a number of projects over the years. Now we are engaged working with specific people groups, partnering with Pioneers across Northern Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And so our partnership with them is very focused on taking those people groups through the within reach scale, mm-hmm. right? From getting workers on site to culture and language training, and then into the process of Bible translation, making disciples, planning a healthy disciple-making church, right? So that's kind of a short version of it. But yeah, so we're doing that with Pioneers right now. How are you engaging with Pioneers? I think y'all have got a pretty cool story working together.
They really came up with the idea long ago. So Steve was in Indonesia. They were looking at deploying resources to help out with just skilled work that needed to happen. It was assumed to be more white-collar work. And they launched an initiative before my time. I would bet probably 2018, 2017. Steve could tell you exactly, called Propel.
Okay.
Professionals compelling them to the field to participate in the Great Commission. And they started studying they studied the project and started working with this. They had a full-time guy that was on it. He also was completing his PhD. This is Bruce Wilson, who's now the one of the senior leaders at GACX, which is a global missions organization. And he completed his PhD in virtual volunteering at Asbury in 2023. So very, very fresh research that talks about the opportunity, the capacity, some of the challenges there. And so really Steve came up with a lot of the things that are foundational to what we're doing.
Well, not surprising. Steve and Arlene are a powerhouse couple. And I'm looking through in your website, you've got some testimonials there as well of some different folks and how they've gotten engaged. But I think I just want to speak to the listener for a second. So often in my career, in my work, and in ministry and discipling guys, you meet people and it's like, I want to be a part of something bigger than myself. This job is good and it's taking care of me and my family, but I feel like I can't be fully who I am at work all day, right? I feel like I can't be fully engaged in using my skills. And you said it earlier, right? I'm not able to be a goer right now in this season of life. I can't pack up and move to another country and spend 10 to 15 years with a people group. I'm not there yet. Now, I might be at some point, but right now I'm not. So, man, I could take part-time, some of my time, volunteer time. How can I be engaging if I'm not right now, but I feel called to get in the game?
One of the first discussions that I had with an academic about, well, what do students do when they feel called to the field? What he said is one of his greatest concerns is that you may walk in with a computer science background or an engineering like curriculum, and what these students are being told is, well, you should study Greek because you can go be a missionary. And when you look at kind of the way missions has changed, traditional missions is clearly still a big thing and will continue to be, but creative access countries where you can't be a traditional missionary, where you have to be creative access, that you start a software company, you start a consulting firm, you're a marketplace professional, you have to have skills to go do these things. And frankly, if you look at the growth of the global South, you look at what's happened in Africa and in China, as it turns out, there are already Christians there. And what they really need are some things that Americans are really good at. We're good at commerce. We're good at engineering. We're good at computer science. So some of the things that, this individual had suggested to me is that a lot of times we try to push people down a specific path that is missionary focused. And really what they should be doing is, building their heart for Christ and then getting the skills they need to be able to go make an impact in those areas.
Oh, man, I love that. And I think there's a few people that probably needed to hear that. I love that Switchboard gives me a chance in my after hours and my weekend time to do something for the kingdom. I love that I might be equipped with a skill set in my 20s or 30s or at any point in my life and not have a lot of extra capital. I don't feel like I'm necessarily at this point a big funder of the work, but I'm good at this thing. And now I can do this thing for kingdom purpose, right?
Listen, let me tell you, you're a 60-year-old grandma who's in tennis shoes, who's been in the field for 40 years, and you are great at ministering with trafficked girls in that town. But like every month and a half, you have to go figure out how to update your website. Oh my gosh, it's awful. Or, do you know how many 50-year-olds are good at MailChimp? Like none, zero.
Right.
But there's a 27-year-old kid who could go bam and do Webflow or do WordPress in a heartbeat, and it'd be way better. It'd be way faster. And oh, by the way, this is a way to get, I call them zillennials, Z's and millennials, involved in service. You could do something for real that really makes a difference to the field today, and it'll be awesome. And the person that you're helping benefits so much from the very little that you did because they can't do that thing. So I think it's really ground changing to start thinking of the types of things that we could use to mobilize those individuals around a specific use case. And I talked to a Baylor professor this week. I'm like, so here's what we're finding. We have huge demand from the field, from people that are good at digital marketing, SEO, website, graphic arts, visualization, those types of things. And I said, if your students are believers and they really want to make an enormous impact, it could be 2 hours a month, but they could rock somebody's world. He's like, I am ready. Let's see what it would take to talk to those guys about that.
Well, let's think that through. In the concept of where is the Magnificent Seven, right? AI, like the massive growth in the marketplace right now tends to be happening in that space. And if you look at the companies and the demographic of the companies and the location of the companies of where those are, a lot of talk right now is like, I'm using AI for this, and it's giving me bad results because it reflects its makers, and its makers are not Christian, and they're trying to rewrite history. And I'm speaking kind of honestly here because it's happening.
It's true. Well, we saw it last week.
We're still seeing it. There is a massive need for you, listener, who loves the Lord, to use your skill set in that demographic, in that arena, right? And be a light in that arena. That's huge. And so I love that you're saying, like, we're kind of calling out don't point somebody in another direction. If that's the skill they're after, then let's leverage that skill set, right?
Well, and as a point of encouragement, I would tell you, you are not alone. There's a group that's called missional.ai. They do a conference where it's kingdom-minded AI, machine learning experts who come together and they look at really two different things. One is obviously translation, because it's really good at that. And number two is kingdom growth. So what are the applications that you can use that you can build into the solutions and the types of things you're trying to do so that we can take these tools and use them for kingdom purposes as opposed to have them used against us?
Another thing you mentioned, Scott, I want to pull on the thread of, is you said take a 1 hour mission trip.
Right.
What's that?
Well, so what we do is that as we have kingdom consultants basically build profiles in the platform, we give them the ability to engage the mission organizations with a thing that they have particular expertise in. So, for example, someone has expertise in marketing strategy, you could be a mission organization, say, hey, I'd like to book an hour with this person and talk to them about marketing strategy. It could be something about an accounting thing. It could be something about an education or a curriculum thing. So the ability to engage somebody quickly on the platform is pretty amazing. And I'll tell you, I was actually at this church at a conference. This was a business mission conference a few months ago.
Bam.
A BAM conference. And we had a gentleman, a young man, actually, in my world. He comes up to the table. He hits our QR code. Ding, 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 ding. We're talking the whole time. He fills out a profile. He clicks a button. He never takes his eyes off of me and the other person that's talking to him. And then I look at the computer, and 2 requests have gone out. And then before he left, which was about 15 minutes later,
Come on.
both requests have been filled. One was around digital marketing, and another was around something to do with supply chain. I mean, literally, he put in 2 requests. He defined what he wanted. He clicked a button, and it went out to the volunteers, and both of them got accepted. And then the system, based on what your interaction is, it suggests a time on both your calendars to lock a time.
So why would I not have a profile active?
I mean, if you're not serious, I will tell you that the common statistic, 99% of believers don't really get directly involved in the Great Commission. And I'm going to argue that 90% say they want to be involved, and maybe 50% actually would be involved if poked.
Yeah.
So if you really don't want to be involved, then you probably shouldn't.
Right.
I would tell you that if you don't have verbal skills, I mean, we have a woman in Canada who has an accounting background who had a stroke, and she cannot talk, and she is available to work on this particular accounting package for the Great Commission because that's her heart and that's what she wants to do.
Oh man, how
there
cool is
there are
that?
no limits. Actually, I have another story about a guy that I met here in the lobby of this church. And we had set up a booth, and the mission pastor here had said, hey, and if you want to serve remotely in your skill set, from home, you can start tomorrow. Go see Switchboard in the lobby. And this really great guy comes up, and this guy he's truly a bona fide expert in animation. 20 years at DreamWorks, Joseph,
Wow.
Prince of Egypt. I mean, if you looked at a resume of background, this guy had the most amazing background of anybody I've ever seen. Fascinating discussion, amazing background. And I got done, and he took the little brochure, and I turned around, I'm like, talking to myself, I'm like, there is no way. This guy, I mean, this is way too specialized. This is never going to happen. He walks away, and he's like, gee, Scott seems like a great guy. I love what those guys are doing. There is no way that this is going to happen. Within 1 week, and I promise you, this is an accurate statement. I could pull emails to prove it. Within 1 week, we got a request from a guy who had met one of our guys at a birthday party in Jordan, who had basically built a Facebook page that was targeted. It was Christian messaging targeted at a Muslim audience. And they were getting, at that time, 1.6 million views per month. And he had all the statistics on shares and stuff like that. So using images only. And so his request was somebody that can help me figure out how to do animation in a way that I could afford it, that understands kind of the big picture and could come up with a strategy. If there's any chance you could had a guy like that, it would be amazing. Request comes in, our team's like, yeah, that ain't going to happen. And then I saw it, and I had just met Bruce. And so I called Bruce and told him, and what he told me is that, love what you guys are doing, but I put myself on the list to help with construction here in Kyle, Texas, because I didn't think there's any way I could do animation for the kingdom. To see how God could take something that even is super specialized and that there's somebody out there that needs that exact thing, I'm telling you, if you're not willing to do a profile, you're just not willing to serve, because there's no excuse.
There's no excuse. And when you fill out a profile, don't limit yourself.
Right.
Be sure to say what you're really good at. Even if you feel like there's not a use for it necessarily, put it out there. We're talking about the entire global kingdom here. There's
Right.
somebody that probably needs you, probably
Right.
more than one somebody.
Right.
So if you're listening and you're looking for another way to get engaged, go fill out a profile. If you're a missionary or a sending organization or a parachurch or a local church or a company, if you're a company and you want to look at getting work from people that have a true north, aren't going to bend the knee or kind of take the easy way out, but are going to do things the right way because that's how they're going to live their life, walking with the Lord.
Yep.
get on there and fill out a profile and talk about what you need.
Completely agree.
So business is missions. Let's pull on that thread too. That's a new acronym. Bam! It's starting to pop up everywhere. I'm starting to get LinkedIn requests for people, and they've got it. They've got that in their profile, right? So for you listening, be looking for this. It's out there. This concept, and I'll let Scott explain it further. But this concept is, look, my job, my work is committed to the Lord, right? Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, the work you do it with all your heart, as if working for the Lord, not for human masters, because you know you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. So if you take that concept seriously, and how you work and the company you own or lead or a part of, you are doing missions, you are doing ministry all the time, right?
Completely.
Right. So business as missions is this new concept that's kind of tail wagging the dog alongside a few other new acronyms that are showing up of, how do I invest my money in companies and businesses that are Christian-led, that are mission-focused, and that are changing the world? And so there's this. I was at the Kingdom Advisors Conference in Orlando in February with 3,000 other folks in the finance industry and investment world. Biblically responsible investing, right? How are we screening in, not just screening out, right? How are we looking at private markets? How are we supporting the right companies? This is a big push, right? And I think it's a push that even the local church really needs to educate themselves on. We really need to educate the local pastors and the leaders, because it's not just like, don't just focus on the 10% or 15 or 20 or prayerfully more that you're giving. What are you doing with the rest of it? What's your portfolio look like? How are you investing that? And is it redemptive, or is it just kind of going along with everybody else and chasing the index and hitching a ride on the economy in general? It may be so. The right thing to do right now is educate yourself and take one step forward.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Give me your take on that.
Well, you're tempting me to head down a rabbit trail that I have great passion for.
Go.
Oh my gosh.
Chase it.
First thing is, for years, business's mission was kind of an excuse to get into a country. And so you set up a business, and I'm doing air quotes here for those who are who aren't seeing me. And what we've learned is that, for one thing, that wasn't very accurate. And for another, it's not sustainable. And so real businesses with real business leaders who have good supply chain and good systems and good production and all those things are really important. And frankly, every country that I've been associated with that won't let mission teams come in as missionaries, as M's, you say, I'm going to start a software company. They're like, come on in. We'll give you a tour of the town and invite your friends. So one of the first meetings I had was with a group that was in Macedonia that was basically an engineering software company that was very welcome and doing some really great things. And so to me, business's missions is a big part of, I think, what future commerce and future missions can look like.
Absolutely.
I think the partnership between the local businesses and the local churches. Now, this is moving more away from the traditional missionary model. It's more of an indigenous church, indigenous missionary, and a business as mission, kind of all working in concert.
Right.
I think is where it goes.
That's what you're doing with your life, Scott. And I love that. You've taken a leap of faith and a transition here that probably for some period is not as lucrative to your worldly bottom line, but it may be paying huge deposits into your heavenly bottom line.
I appreciate that. I think that for us, we're just trying to, honestly, we're trying to take friction out of the supply chain. I mean, to me, the allocation of resources in terms of not just dollars, but human capital.
Absolutely.
It's really rough right now. And I think that what's interesting is that when you pull down the barrier, whether or not I'm serving with a group that's in, Mexico, or a group that's in an unreached people in a part of the world you maybe have never heard of, it's the same amount of work. So all of a sudden, the ability to pour resources into those historically under-resourced areas becomes a matter of adjusting for time zones. It's amazing how simple it is to serve.
Let the rubber hit the road for a second here. If there's a business that has managed to get behind enemy lines and is up and running, and there are people there that are loving on the community through possibly an underground church, possibly kind of having to stay off the grid and out of sight, but there are people that are getting help, and that business cannot be sustainable. It starts to fail because it's not properly resourced with the right human capital
Right.
and the right intelligence and the right strategy and structure and design. And those people end up being visas revoked and asked to leave that country.
Yeah.
Guys, that's one step forward, 5 steps back.
Right.
So if you're not engaged in a place where you can apply your skill set to keep that company profitable and relevant and growing in that place, we're hurting the progress
Right.
of advancing the kingdom.
Right.
You're doing nothing isn't doing nothing.
Right.
Right? We know the phrase sin never stays where it's committed, right? But your inaction is probably, if I'm pulling really kind of on this whole string here, causing an effect somewhere else in the world that you're maybe not even aware of yet. And your action, now that you're hearing this and you're going to take action, I see literally Clint filling out a profile right now next to us while he's recording. Your action to go fill out your profile is going to change your future and the future of who knows how many other people.
By the way, how long do you think it takes to fill out a profile?
Well, he's already back taking notes again, so I'm going to say 3 minutes.
I would say 5. So he's faster than most.
He's very quick.
He's fast. It's really not much, because what really happens is that we're really starting a conversation between the field and the everyday believer. So you fill out a profile and you tell us what you can do, and then something new comes up that we hadn't thought about. Hey, if you can do this too, click this button. And so your profile actually gets kind of dialed in as a conversation between supply and demand, so it gets smarter and smarter over time. And I know you mentioned AI. I will say that there are some really powerful things that we can do with AI behind the scenes that just look at, for example, I say I'm a CPA, you could infer good with Microsoft Excel, and I'm probably detail-oriented to some correlation, probability. So based on that, then we could go into AI and say, well, guys that are good with Excel and are detail-oriented could probably do this kind of stuff too. So
right. Yep. I see your point.
As new opportunities come up, we could say, hey, does this fit you? If you're interested, we'll make the introduction.
I love that. So the call to action, right? The call to action is, let's go fill out a profile at Switchboard, right? Globalswitchboard.io. Take 5 minutes, fill out a profile, and let's see what happens. Let's see what pops up. See what opportunities come in. Obviously, if you get connected to an opportunity, it is an opportunity, right? You discuss it. It may not make sense or be a fit. It's not like you're entering into a contract just yet.
Yeah,
but
the way it works is that the mission says, here's kind of where I need help, and they document it as best they can. And we've got an AI tool that helps them document it well. And then you say, that might work for me. You click a button and it automatically sets up an introduction. That 1 hour phone call, they basically review the scope, decide whether or not it makes sense. It's, yeah, you're right, it's 1 hour a month. And then at the end of it, it's a double opt-in. So I would love to help with
there
that.
You go.
That guy would be great. And then they're mapped together and we're out of the picture. We're just trying to get you guys introduced and off and running.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a hard question. Is there a cost?
There's only your time.
Oh,
wow. Yeah, there's only your time.
Okay. So I'm not paying to put my profile up, or I'm not paying for a connection. So if I make a connection and I end up taking a job with a company, there's not a cut coming back.
To either side.
Wow.
To either side.
Okay. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's my ask to those of you listening, whether I know you or not. When you do this and you have a connection, and here pretty soon you have a story to tell, would you email me and Clint and give us that story? Dustin at unreachedpodcast.com, Clint at unreachedpodcast.com. I would think it'd be so cool if a few months from now we got to tell a story, or maybe there's 3 or 4 or 5, and we do just like an episode of, here's my stories of how I got connected to XYZ organization, and this is what we did, and this is what happened, right? This is what God redeemed through Switchboard, through Scott's faithfulness, through the team. And I know your team is growing, and you got great traction right now. I know you're launching some new things. Thanks for being here, Scott. What would be your final word? I'm going to ask you to pray for the listeners, because that's how we end our episodes. But what final thoughts before prayer would you have?
Every believer is called to the Great Commission. And so to me, to assume that you can't or won't or wouldn't be appreciated, or that it's hard, you're just not trusting God. So, I mean, we encourage people to serve however you serve, wherever you're called to serve.
I love that. And would you pray for us on the way out?
Now, on previous podcasts, you have people do this in other languages. I don't know any other languages. Is that okay?
That is more than okay. That's just a unique thing. Clint loves that, because he's like, you've never been prayed for in Wantakian. You've never been prayed for in Malayalam. Now you have, right? But no, we'll stick with our heart language. How about that?
Our heart language.
We are a people group, right? We do count.
Yes, we
our
are.
heart language.
Father, what a glorious day and what a time that you bring to this world, that you put us in a group of people that have a heart for you, Father, and that we could truly reach the world for Christ, that you have given us everything that we need. Even just the technology and the things that have happened in the last few years, we can easily do things that were virtually impossible just 10 years ago. Father, I just pray that as we are as we're a group of people that really have traditional values, that we would recognize the opportunities that you've presented us, Father, and that we would embrace the ways that we can use new methods and new ways that we can reach the world. We just thank you, and we love you for a chance to be together to do this in Jesus' name. Amen.
See you next time. Thank you for listening to Unreached. Our sincere desire is that what you've heard today will cause you to see the mission of God differently and your role in it more clearly. If this adds value for you, and we hope it does, would you please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen? Also share with your family, your friends, your church, your life group, small group, D group, wherever you do life. And if you want to connect with us, find us on Instagram at Unreached Podcast or email us at unreachedpodcast@gmail.com.